Good morning. The weather's a little different this morning than it was yesterday for sure. It feels good to be in here in the warm building, but appreciate Jeremy taking last week's lesson in our study of the Gospel of John, and we're going to continue that today. Today we are going to talk about the I am statements that we see throughout the Gospel of John. But before we get into those, I kind of want to set the stage just a little bit. This seems loud to me. Is it too loud? It's perfect? Okay. So I kind of want to set the stage just a little bit to try and get our minds wrapped around what's going on at the time, and I think it'll help us to kind of understand these statements that Jesus is making here in a little while. So just kind of imagine yourself back in that time being transported back to first century Judea. It was under Roman occupation, and the Jewish life, they were rooted in traditions, temple rituals, deep longing for the promised Messiah that they were waiting to come. And then all of a sudden, we have Jesus that steps into the picture. What were they expecting when he steps into the picture versus what they got? What's that? An earthly king. Okay, that's right. And they ended up getting basically a humble carpenter's son. So, not really what they expected. But through his words, through his actions, he does begin to reveal certain things. And everything that he reveals, it obviously alters and changes the course of human history. But we find these declarations known as I am statements. There's 7 of them in total. And we'll break these down here in just a little bit. But they're not really ordinary like self-descriptions. They're basically metaphors from everyday life that we can relate to. So the first one, he proclaims, I am the bread of life, offering sustenance for the soul in a world hungry for meaning. He says, I am the light of the world. That light would pierce the darkness of sin. He says, I'm the door of the sheep, or maybe the gate, which would provide safety, access to safety. He says, I am the good shepherd. So he would lay down his life, obviously, for his flock. He says, I am the resurrection in life. So he could conquer death. And then, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Saying the only way, there's an exclusive path, basically, to the Father. And then, finally, I am the true vine, which Jeremy mentioned and talked about the vine in one of our earlier classes as well. But why does he choose, or why do you think he chooses this particular phrasing, I am? Roger?
The points he made by the things that he did.
Okay.
And they all came at the right time, too.
Okay.
In response to what somebody was said or
So to put emphasis on something that he did is basically what you're saying? Okay. Anybody else? Why else do you think I am was used by Jesus in these? Reference to God. That's right. I agree with you 100%. He was always referencing the Father in a lot of these. And then also I think that it relates back to the foundation, the Old Testament. The Old Testament was basically the foundation of the Jewish faith. In Exodus 3:14, Moses encounters God, and what's he say? I am who I am. So I think that there's several reasons that we can pin down on why he was using this I am statement. But he's trying to get these people to realize he is who he says he is. But by adopting this I am, if you will, how do you think they perceived that in that time, during that time? Blasphemy, yeah. It was like an audacious claim. Basically, these people were hearing, what do you mean? But he wasn't merely just a prophet or just a teacher, but God in the flesh, the Word made flesh. We also see that it echoes the prophetic visions in Isaiah, where God repeatedly uses "I am" to affirm his uniqueness. He says, "I am the first and I am the last. Apart from me, there is no God." So all this, it sparked debates when he said this. Different, religious leaders, they would debate. Some believed, some did not. Some accused him of making himself equal with God. And that ultimately led to what with Jesus? His death. That's right. Yeah. So John, he weaves these statements throughout his gospel here, and we'll read through them here in just a little bit. But the time period, the best I can tell, was somewhere around AD 90. It was likely to a mixed audience of Jews and Gentiles. But these were written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. So there was a lot of skepticism even whenever he was making these statements. And how do these ancient words, how do they speak to us today in our modern lives? Mm-hmm. They were caught up in the physical. Most everything he says is a lot of it does relate to the physical, and he's trying to get them to understand that it's the spiritual, obviously not the physical. So, yeah, I totally agree, Russell. But in my opinion, God kind of turned the kingdom upside down, if you will, when he sent Jesus to live in the flesh. Because they're looking for something different. They're looking for something unlike Jesus. They wanted a earthly king, like you mentioned, someone that looked and walked the part, and Jesus was just pretty simple and ordinary. And in our lives today, how many times do we hear the truth, but yet we are blinded by something and we don't want to follow the truth? How many times does that happen in our lives today? I know it happens in mine, quite a bit, but even when Neil or Hiram's up here preaching and we hear things as Christians, sometimes we have a hard time of following those. What are some things that get in the way of that? The same things that these people were dealing with, getting in the way then, gets in our way now. But what are some of those things? Pride. Pride's a huge one. Pride is a huge one. I think traditions got in the way a lot. They had deep-rooted traditions. We can have deep-rooted traditions as well, maybe in how we grew up, or maybe if we were part of another religion and we are converted, we still may not want to let go of some of those traditions. Or maybe just want to do things our way and not God's way. So there's many, many things that we can talk about that keep us from following the truth or knowing who he really is. So they were struggling with some of those. Also, there's events that have happened throughout history. There's tragedies that have happened because people chose to ignore the truth. And one thing came to mind was something that happened January 28th, 1986. Do you guys remember what that was? On January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded not long after takeoff. But the engineers for the company that were responsible for those rocket boosters, they had warned NASA, they had warned the officials the night before that the cold temperatures they were experiencing could cause these O-rings and the rubber seals to these boosters to fail. And then it allowed hot gases to escape and lead to a catastrophe. And they had data showing that these O-rings performed poorly in cold weather tests. Yep.
I happened to be down there when that occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And what really impacted me is I went to the Church of Christ in Gainesville on Wednesday night. I mean, I'd been at a Corvette show and he came back to my aunt's. And there was a girl there, one of the college girls was just, everybody was consoling her. She was terribly distraught. And her dad was one of the engineers for Orthodicon.
Mm-hmm. That's the company. Yeah, that's right.
They did everything they could to stop that. And she was so torn up because her dad, who was a member of the church, then questioned, should I have gone out and laid under the thing?
Mm-hmm.
They knew the risk. In fact, everybody in Florida said they would never launch it because of the temperatures. It was frost that morning and so forth. But I remember that girl being distraught, and her dad was one of the guys that tried to stop it.
Yeah,
That question, should I have done more? Of course, they did basically everything they could.
yeah. Well, that's really interesting that you had some firsthand experience there with that. But they did. They tried to warn them. They tried to stop this. But why do you think that they let it continue, the launch? Publicity, that would be one of them. Pressures, what else? Money. Yeah, political considerations, schedule pressures. There was even a planned State of the Union address that played a part in that. But after 73 seconds after liftoff, they had the failure. It exploded, killed 7 crew members. One was a teacher, Krista McAuliffe. And that's one of those days you always remember where you're at. I was just 7 years old, but I know exactly where I was at, who I was with. Kind of like 9/11, we all do the same thing.
You were how old?
7. I was 7 years old, but I remember that. My parents were teachers, so her being a teacher on this was pretty significant in our family. But and she's one of those names that if you ask me, I can recall her name just any time. So anyway, it was a big deal. But it resulted in loss of life. The space program was shut down for about 2 years. And this just exemplifies, how pressures or silencing the truth can lead to just a devastating consequence. And when we relate that to Christianity, ignoring the truth or doing things their way or having pride get in the way and not knowing exactly who Jesus is and following him, it would have devastating consequences for sure. Yeah, Rhonda. Absolutely. I think that played a part.
I'll throw a different perspective in there. I see, looking at this in the defense of this nation, the risk versus the reward. Those astronauts all knew exactly what they were getting to. Now, there's always a risk associated when you put that type of platform into space. But I know that from the strategic messaging to our adversaries, I can't help but think in the same thing of God sending his son. He knew the risk.
He did.
But he also knew the reward. So, I just don't want to look at it from just one lens there. There was a big piece in messaging to the world of what the capabilities of the United States were to deter that against our homeland.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because even in our lives today, it's risk versus reward when it comes to becoming, being a Christian and living our lives. Some of these people didn't want to risk certain things and believe in Jesus or realize he is who he is because they were worried about the risk, right? And sometimes we're worried about the risk when we're out here. We don't want to say something. We may not want to continue that conversation with our coworker or with our family member or whatever because we're worried about the risk. Just like he said, we're worried about the fallout. They may not want to be our friends anymore. Our family may not want to come to Thanksgiving anymore. Something like that. But good point there. So anyway, as we're going through this study, I just kind of want you to think about, do we really know Jesus? Or is he just someone that we read on paper? Is it just someone that's in a book? Are we just going through the motions? And the world's asking who Jesus is, and we should be ready to tell them about him. And I think that's what some of these I am statements, they reveal. He's trying his best to get his point across, and some are believing, but a lot of people are not.
You know, one thing to point out here too is of all the major religions, in a couple of discussions I've had with people, what's so great about Christianity? If you look at the four major world religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Muslims, those are all based on prophets. Jesus is the only one that said, I am God in the flesh.
Yep.
In other words, there was no misunderstanding about, him making people realize who he was. He wasn't a prophet of God. He was God in the flesh.
That's right. And as we read through these, most of them, if not all of them, he's always going to reference the Father in most of these. They're also, every one of them are going to have some Old Testament ties. They're going to relate back to that. And then at the end of most of them, there may be one or two that's not, you see how people reacted, and, in a bad way, with right after what he said. So anyway, let's start with the first one. I am the bread of life. Let's turn to John 6. And we're going to start in verse 22, just so we can kind of capture all of the context here. Verse 22, chapter 6. Says, on the following day, when the people were standing on the other side of the sea, saw that there was no other boat there except that the one which the disciples had entered, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but his disciples had gone away alone. However, other boats came from Tiberias near the place where they ate bread after the Lord had given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they also got into boats and came to Capernaum, seeking Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Jesus answered and said to them, most assuredly I say to you, you seek me, not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has set his seal on him. Then they said to him, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? Jesus answered and said to them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. Therefore they said to him, what sign will you perform then, that we may see it and believe you? What work will you do? Our fathers ate the manna in the desert, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Then Jesus said to them, most assuredly I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Then they said to him, Lord, give us this bread always. And Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me, and yet you do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. So he's already referenced his Father 3 or 4 times throughout, and then he's going to continue to do it. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up at the last day. This is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. But then listen to what happens right afterwards. This is a continuous thing. They complained about him. I'm the bread which came down from heaven, and they said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, I have come down from heaven? So, and we could keep going there, but what's Jesus trying to tell them here? I am the bread of life. This isn't a trick question either. So, what's he trying to say? What happens to us? Some of us ate breakfast this morning, but what happens to us at about 11:30 when Neil's getting toward the end of his sermon? We're hungry. Yeah, that physical bread this morning is not lasting, and but Jesus is trying to tell them that through Him you will have everlasting life. Go ahead.
That's why the physical bread is a temporary thing. It sustains us for a while, and then it has to be repeated again. But the bread that Jesus provides is one that lasts eternity.
Why do you think they were having a hard time understanding that?
They were thankful for what he had gave them when he fed the 5,000, and they did not understand what Jesus was telling them about the bread from heaven that would last forever.
Okay.
I don't think we're any different, Barrett. I really don't think we're any different than they were.
I don't either. Yeah.
We all look at the physical. You look around us, our health deteriorates. I mean, we all are in different places in life. There's those among us that worry about food. Some of us don't worry about food. But we focus on the physical, and it's hard. I think if you wasn't raised in the church or you was in church and know about God, you don't think about God. I may be dead wrong, but I think there's people in the world that never think about God. It's all about the physical. And then we wake up and our health is gone, our treasures are gone, and there's nothing left. But with God, it's always there.
That's right.
It's hard to understand that. It really is hard, I think.
Yeah. Hard for them and hard for us, even though He's standing there with them, you know. But
I don't think they ever, I don't think they ever at that particular time, and maybe we don't today, think of Christ as something from heaven. They think physically, we think physically of the only for the physical thing. Christ did not, they expected Him to be a king that as wearing crowns as our people do today.
That's right.
Do today. And
Yeah.
I think that was the main problem. Christ did not fit their.
He didn't fit it.
They
That's
thought
right.
He should be,
Yeah.
what they wanted him to be.
That's right. Go ahead, Nan.
Most of these people probably also had heard of bread from heaven before, because they'd heard about the manna.
They had.
And that was physical bread, and it did come from heaven. So I'm thinking some of them would have immediately thought of that.
Yeah, they should know that. And that our Old Testament reference here, it echoes manna, just like you said. God provided to the Israelites in the wilderness in Exodus 16. It sustained them physically, but of course that's only temporarily. And then also we can tie this to the Old Testament. Jesus positions Himself as the eternal spiritual bread from heaven that gives lasting life, fulfilling Deuteronomy 8:3, where God teaches that man does not live on what? Man does not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. So we also see it connects a little bit to Psalm 78, 23 through 25, where it talks about God raining down the bread of angels on His people. So He's always, all of these are going to have some Old Testament or relate to the Old Testament in some way to try and help these people understand that He is who He says He is. You know, what hungers us in our lives, and what do we try to fill it up with other than Jesus?
Entertainment.
Okay, entertainment,
Success.
success. The list could be very long if we sat here and continued to name those things, but money, success, careers, entertainment, other people, maybe even our children. But we're always going to have that hunger unless we have Jesus in our lives. Think about the society we live in and everything, it's consumerism all over the place, the instant gratification. We can get our groceries on our doorstep, fast food, all that kind of stuff. How does that make it harder for us sometimes maybe to deal with not looking at the physical hunger, but looking at Jesus in order to satisfy that? How does that make it harder for us in today's world?
Many people in the world don't see the need. They don't consider themselves needy.
And everything you see, we're not told that, right? If you were worldly, you would think like the world.
That's why sometimes a health crisis or something happening will change people's opportunity.
That's right. All right, good discussion there. So just to sum it up, it teaches that true fulfillment and eternal life come from a relationship with Jesus, not temporary material things. Just as physical bread satisfies hunger temporarily, Jesus satisfies the deeper hunger and our need for purpose, forgiveness, and connection with God. It warns us against seeking only earthly provisions while ignoring spiritual needs. Okay. All right, number 2. This is I am the light of the world. Let's turn to John chapter 8. And, let's see. John 8. Okay, John chapter 8. We're going to go ahead and start in verse 1 and start reading there. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now early in the morning he came again into the temple. All the people came to him. He sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what do you say? This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And then we'll see here in verse 13, the Pharisees therefore said to him, You bear witness of yourself. Your witness is not true. Jesus answered and said to them, Even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true. For I know where I came from and where I'm going. But you do not know where I come from and where I'm going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. And yet, if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone. I am with the Father who sent me. So there he's referencing the Father who sent him. It's also written in your law that the testimony of 2 men is true. I am one who bears witness of myself, and the Father, there it is again, who sent me, bears witness of me. Then they said to him, Where is your Father? Jesus answered, You know neither me nor my Father. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. These words Jesus spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple, and no one laid hands on him, for his hour had not yet come. Then they start talking again in the following verses about killing him and so forth and so on. But so this was kind of spoken probably during the Feast of the Tabernacles, and where they used lamps to symbolize God's guidance. And Jesus, of course, claims to be the source of the light. So what were they misunderstanding here in this particular verse, or in this particular statement? I am the light of the world. Y'all were doing good earlier. Go ahead.
The play on words is light, and the sun issue in is the light that exposes, or that you need to not be living in the dark, and the sun, S-O-N, that's the light from above that we need not to live in the darkness of sin.
Okay. Yep. Light guides us, right? Just as Jesus is going to guide us if we follow him. Light gives us comfort. It guides us through life, helps us make decisions. That's right. And if we follow the light, what happens to sin? If sin's darkness, what happens to it? If we've got light, we have less darkness, right? So I think that's the point he's trying to get across here. In the Old Testament, Jesus draws from the pillar of fire that guided and protected Israel during the Exodus. And that's found in Exodus 13. I'm not going to read some of these just for the sake of time, but Exodus 13, 21 through 22. It's also in Exodus 14, 19 through 20, but it symbolizes God's presence in darkness. And then also we look in Isaiah. It says, the servant who will be a light for the Gentiles. That's found in Isaiah 42:6 and 49:6. So, and then also, who created light? God created light. So, light should guide us. If we follow that light, which is Jesus, we should have less darkness in our lives. We should have less sin in our lives.
Also, one thing we need to always remember is light will spell darkness, but darkness can't spell light.
Good point. Say that again.
Light will spell darkness, but darkness can't
Spell.
spell.
Okay, I got you. I like it. Where in our lives do we need Jesus? Do we need the light to guide us? All the time, basically? Every day. All right. Decision making.
That's why he gave us this wonderful book.
That's right, yeah. You got to read it. That's right. So, let's use Jesus as the light to guide us. One story that I think I mentioned this in a class, but it's probably been 10 years ago. I don't know. But every time I do something and light is brought up, for some reason I think about this, so I'm going to tell it to you today. But when I was younger, I was probably Corbin's age, and 10, 11 years old, my uncle used to take me out hunting. We'd go in the afternoon, he'd set me under a tree, but then he'd walk off and go, to his own little hunting spot, and there I am, scared to death, but it's still daylight, feels pretty good. And then you sit there and you wait, and the light starts to fade, and it starts to fade more, and then before long, you're sitting there by yourself, 10 or 11 years old, hearing things in the woods, and you're terrified, basically. And then all of a sudden, you start to see a little light coming through the woods, flashlight, and it gets a little brighter and a little brighter and a little brighter, and then you start to get comfort, and you find comfort in that light, because that's your protection. You know that, hey, my uncle's coming to get me, and we're getting out of here. And I always think about that when I think about light, because Jesus gives us that comfort, and his light gives us that comfort to help us and help guide us. Okay, how do we be a light to others?
Example.
Example. All right. What else? Encouragement. Okay. What else? Is it hard to always be a light to others as we go about our lives? It can be sometimes, right? Absolutely. Anything else on how can we be a light to others?
Sometimes just being there, Barrett, right there at the start of it, Jesus didn't say anything. He said he kind of ignored everybody, but he was there.
Yeah.
Eventually he spoke up, but sometimes just being there.
Being there for other people during whatever's going on. Yeah. Yeah. What'd you say, Russell? Sharing the gospel. Mm-hmm. What are some ways that we can maintain our light as we go through our lives? How do we keep those batteries charged in our flashlight? Studying. Okay, studying. Anything else? Prayer. Being together with your church family. Being here this morning, I think, is huge. The biggest one for me is being, in community with other believers. That helps me maintain my light. Being with you guys, being up here this morning, that helps me maintain my light. Anything else before we move on?
Sometimes some of your biggest influence of being a light is just simply to suffer being wrong sometimes. Because if you let a person wrong you, you don't seek retribution, or you just, and there again, this is situation ethics. Each thing is determined, but many times you can just suffer a wrong, and the person actually realizes it, but you didn't jump them for it, and later on, it increases your center of influence.
Mm-hmm.
With that person. Look how many times Jesus suffered being wrong.
Right.
I think by living in the light is what you give to other people who are in need every day, every hour.
Yep. He said living in the light is giving to other people in need every day. So to sum this one up, this I am statement reveals Jesus as the guide who brings us clarity, truth, and hope in a world full of confusion, sin, and despair. Following him means walking in moral and spiritual light, avoiding the pitfalls of darkness like deception or fear. It emphasizes that without him, people stumble blindly through life.
With the light, a lot of people, not a lot of people, some people who really don't follow Jesus or don't really follow it too much. But they think that they should be entitled to something because they give, okay, they can give money for their time, and they feel that, like they hope, they should have something. God, Jesus don't work that way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just because we give doesn't mean we need to expect something in return, for sure.
It's how you are inside that he knows that your eternal soul will be saved on the day that you die.
And I think that goes back to what I mentioned before. Do we really know Jesus? There are a lot of people that think they know him because they've read him in the good book. They've read him in the Bible, but they don't truly know him. They don't have a relationship with him. Okay, let's move on to number 3. I know we're not going to get finished with this today. That was kind of my plan. We'll finish the rest of this the next time I'm teaching this class. But so number 3 is I am the door, or I am the gate. Let's do John chapter 10. John chapter 10, and we're going to start out in verse 1. It said, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. So Jesus used this illustration, but they did not understand the things which he spoke to them. Then Jesus said to them again, most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he'll be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. So what's he trying to tell them right here? I'm the door. That's the way in. No other way. No other way but through him as the gate. But also, what's he mean by talking about the thieves and the robbers?
He was sending a message to the Jewish leaders because later on, got himself stoned again. So he was, to keep the context of the day, you always have to bear that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
How that he was saying they weren't providing the proper spiritual guidance they should.
So Jesus obviously is the exclusive entry point to safety and salvation and protecting his followers, just like a gate guards the sheepfold. All right, the Old Testament references here. It says in Psalm 118:20, this relates to the gate of the Lord through which the righteous enter, emphasizing exclusive access to God's presence. It also ties into some Old Testament where it says the sheepfold as a place of safety for God's flock, which is found in Numbers 27:15 through 18, which again was Jesus as the sole entry point to salvation and protection. What would be some false doors that we find and that people seek today? False teachers. There's a lot of them out there. They may not think they are, but they are. Yeah. What else? What are some other false doors that that people seek?
Jesus wants me to be happy no matter what.
That's a big one. We hear that all the time, don't we? No matter what you got to do to be happy, I think that is a false door for sure. That's not the way, or that's not what we read in the Bible for sure. What'd you say? Follow your heart. That's off. Yeah, we definitely shouldn't follow our heart. We should follow who? Follow Jesus. That's right. We're told these things over and over and over. Even our kids are told these things. Do whatever makes you happy. Follow your heart.
Those that enter in some other way are not true disciples.
Mm-hmm. So what about the statement that challenges? What about this statement challenges like modern notions of self-reliance, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get the job done kind of thing, rather than individual effort. We can somehow do it ourselves. That's what we think. Pull up our bootstraps. Hey, I can handle this. I can get this done. I can handle this problem, whatever. But he's telling us that the only way is through the gate, which he's talking about through him.
That's okay if we follow God.
That's right. Exactly. And then what about like so we've got tons of different religions out there. lots of different belief systems. How does that, or how does that shape our dialogue when we go about our lives today? How do we handle that with all those different religions, all the different people we come into contact with? How do we handle that in getting people to the true gate here?
We should encourage our friends and loved ones to follow the word, not just a message that the public wants us to hear. I was watching a show the other night, and this elderly woman was talking to this young girl, and she kept saying, "Follow your heart; it'll lead you the way." And at no time did it say, where they encourage people to follow Scripture.
Yeah. So when we run into those people, I don't know if you heard him, but it's just encourage those people to follow Jesus and do it the right way, not just follow your heart like someone was telling the other, the lady on the show that you were watching. But so we should be an encouragement to others, and that can be hard sometimes because they can be family members, they can be people that are very close with us, but we've got to continue. That still doesn't mean that we should back off and not try our best to help them realize that Jesus is the only way. Okay. In conclusion, this one underscores that Jesus is the only way to enter God's kingdom and experience abundant life. As the door, he offers protection from spiritual thieves, which is false teachers or sin, provides access to green pastures of peace and provision. This teaches exclusively in salvation while inviting all to enter through him. All right, we'll see you in a couple weeks.